So this video is meant to cover a very comprehensive experience using the camera in the last 72 hours and everything that I've observed in this time. I've made a list and there are 50 things that I have to say in today's video. Now, if you have viewed countless many number of videos out there already on the Hasselblad X2Dii Mark II and the 35-100E lens, then you probably know some of the more obvious ones, but you might find something interesting here today. Now, I'm not a photographer, I'm not a great photographer, I am just a hobbyist with serious gear acquisition syndrome. Now, if you're anything like me, then I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Over the next couple of weeks or even months, I will be making lots of videos diving deep into the individual functions that I'm going to be introducing today and sharing with you the photos that I'll be making with this camera and this 35-100E. I cannot cover the depth of the beauty of this camera and this lens in just one video, so subscribe if you do want to hear more from a fellow owner of the X2Dii Mark II and the 35-100E. Now, I'm not a paid reviewer and I paid for this lens and this X2Dii Mark II body with my own money at full retail price. So I wasn't sent this camera and the lens before. I was speculating like all of you, and finally I have it in my hands, and it is about 72 hours since I unboxed this and carried this home in my hands. Now, I did say that I have 50 things to say, and that's the title of this video. So what will I be covering? So basically along these lines of 10 things that you'll notice about the camera that has stayed the same from the X2Dii Mark I to the X2Dii Mark II, 12 things that are immediately discernibly different from within 1 minute of touching the camera, 10 more things that you'll observe after 1 hour of use, and 10 more things that you'll notice after a day of use. Now, there will be also a bonus 8 extra things that I'll be talking about for the 35-100E lens. So with 50 things to say, let's dive right in. So the X2Dii Mark II carries over quite a few functionalities from the X2Dii Mark I, or if you are new to the Hasselblad series, then let me show you a little bit more about this camera so that you can fill in the blanks for every extra thing that is added to the X2Dii Mark II. Now, in its core, it uses a 100 megapixel medium format sensor, which is 44 by 33 millimeters, and it has 16-bit color depth for 281 trillion colors. It will also carry a 1 terabyte built-in SSD. Now, this is SSD. It is much faster than any memory card or even CF Express Type B card that you can find. Talking about CF Express Type B, it also has a Type B slot here, which, according to Hasselblad, takes up to 512 gigabyte of card, and there are very specific ones that they use from Sony, SanDisk, and even recently Lexa. But I do have here, this is a unsanctioned Lexa 1 TB card. Does it work? Yes, it works. Okay, there is also a top screen here which shows you the setting, and the battery charge level is the same that is carried over from the original X2Dii. And there will be a EVF here. It is a 5.76 megapixel OLED 1x magnification EVF. It uses the same battery as the previous X2Dii, so the system is exactly the same, the battery is exactly the same as well. Now, it is also manufactured from a solid block of aluminum. Now, there will be some welding together. I don't think it's one solid block in any case, and it will feature leaf shutter system in the lens. So the body itself does not have a shutter. The shutter is all in the Hasselblad lens, and it supports flashing of up to 1/4000th of a second depending on the lens that you use here. Now, everything else from this camera would have changed from the X2Dii Mark I to the X2Dii Mark II, and some of these changes are really remarkably different. And the first immediate difference, even before you touch the camera, is the price. Can you believe that this costs 7,400 and the X2Dii Mark I actually costs 8,200? So it's a price reduction of $800 with all the new technology that's going to be built into this, and as well as some of the differences. So next, I'll talk about the 12 things that you will notice immediately within 1 minute of holding the camera and turning it on. So first off, I have in comparison, this is the Earth Explorer Mark 2D, so the color is a little bit different. This is a toned down brown. The regular X2D it actually carries a matte black color finish. So immediately you will notice that the color is different. This is a matte gray color and the logo is now matte out. So maybe I just show it closer to you, a little bit closer, so you can take a better look. Yep. So the color, the logo is now blacked out. Now the button right here, it looks the same, but it's actually slightly shinier. The body itself is lighter. I mean, not much has changed, but previously it was 790 grams, now it's 730 grams and 840 grams with the battery. Now the grip material here is also slightly different as compared to the previous camera right here. Now, right in front, you will see a LiDAR sensor, and this LiDAR sensor is what makes the autofocus that much faster on the new X2D Mark II camera. And there will be an AF illuminator which throws out white color light, not the orange or the red color light that you are familiar with from other manufacturers. Now you flip around to the back, you'll see that there's a 5D joystick here, up, down, left, right, and it's also clickable. And there is an extra customizable button. Now this scroll wheel in the front, it is now scrollable as well as clickable. Now the most important thing here is actually the screen here. Now previously, this screen was only going to go up to this angle and it was going to be tethered right here. Now right now, what you can do with this camera is you can pull it out a little bit and it will tilt all the way to a 90-degree angle, as well as the ability to tilt downwards. Now the screen itself is actually going to be a much brighter 1400 nits OLED screen capable of displaying HDR. So these are the 12 immediate things that you will see, and you will notice right away within 1 minute of picking up the camera. Now there will be secondary observation, things that you can observe maybe within the first hour of use, maybe a little bit earlier for some people, right? Which is if you open up the flap here. Now this is a magnetic flap already, and over here, it used to be just the charging port, right, on the old camera. But here, you will have a 3.5 mm trigger port under this flap here. Now, when you use a camera, you notice that there is actually haptic feedback. So there's actually a vibration motor that will actually sound off, or rather go off every time you click something. And I think when you do an AF and it acquires function, I don't know, I mean, I feel the haptic feedback throughout the whole menu interface as well. And the camera now supports AFC, autofocus continuous. And talking about autofocus continuous, it also has now up to 425 AF points. Previously, it was 294 on the previous camera. And the focus points are now supporting wide and expanded focal points, not just the spot focusing point. And talking about the focusing point, it now supports, on top of face detection, which was enabled on the old camera, it has eye detection as well as animal, cats and dogs, and car autofocus. Now I mentioned about the CF Express Type B card here. So if you slot in an unsupported CF Express Type B card, actually now it throws a warning that the card is unsupported and it may not be able to work completely. So you do get a warning. Now, importantly, the ISO. The ISO now goes down to 50 as opposed to 64 on the old camera. And most important, or I don't know whether it has carried over in terms of software update to the old camera. I have not managed to test that yet, but it now supports auto ISO on manual mode. Now, previously, when you were on full manual mode, the ISO, you have to set it yourself. There's no auto ISO. They have enabled it on this camera with the firmware update. I'm not sure whether this is done on the old camera if you update the firmware. If you know, let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I'll get around to testing it in just a little bit. And the camera will now show a HDR function. If you're in any mode other than manual mode, full manual mode, you will be able to save the file as a HDR file, and you can save to HEIF, high efficiency file format, as well as JPEG in HDR mode. And it will be able to display on this, on the screen here, because it is 1400 nits capable of supporting HDR, and the Focus mobile app will also be able to work and edit HDR files. Now moving on to the next section, which is the observation within 1 day of use. So there are 10 points that I want to cover here for this camera. Now I don't see anybody talking about this, but if you take a look carefully, right, there are two buttons at the top plate here. Now these two buttons are the AEL and the AFD buttons. Now there is a slight shift, right? Previously the buttons were closer to the eyepiece, and now the buttons are shifted a little bit to the right of the body towards the shutter button, away from the EVF. So maybe it's now easier to reach. So the body looks exactly the same, but I don't think it is, because the cutout for these two buttons would have shifted. So the machining and the production would have definitely shifted. Now you will notice the shutter speed will go down to 3 frames per second instead of previously what was possible at 3.3 frames per second on the X2D Mark I camera. Now the battery life is also reduced. Previously it was able to do 420 frames, 420 shots on according to CIPA standards, but on the new camera, the X2D Mark II, it is reduced now to 327. So presumably there are quite a few more things to power, including the LiDAR, including the continuous autofocus, including HDR. So that definitely uses up more of the processing power. The battery remains the same. It remains to be seen whether they're going to be releasing a higher capacity battery or not. Now, one of the heavily touted features of this camera will be the LiDAR sensor. But if you go through the AF function, the menu within the camera, you will not see any settings at all. So is LiDAR working? Is LiDAR not working? There are no icons, no sensors. Nothing will fire off, well, at least not to the naked eye, but sometimes the camera, they can actually sense the infrared rays that are being fired out. But you cannot tell whether LiDAR is working to help increase your autofocus speed or not. But yes, the autofocus speed is actually increased. Now the next thing I want to talk about, which you probably won't be able to tell, is the in-body image stabilization. So on the previous camera, the in-body image stabilization is rated at 7 stops. Now during the leaks, right, I did mention that it was going to be improved on this camera to 8 stops, right? But you know what? They have actually thrown everything out of the window and said, screw it, let's do 10 stops IBIS, right? 10 stops IBIS. That means to say the stabilization is actually 8 times better on the X2D Mark II than the previous X2D Mark I. 8 times better. Now, it is so precise that it's to the point that you actually need to connect the camera to your phone through the mobile focus app to acquire the GPS signal to know that where you are, and the camera actually compensates for the Earth's rotation speed depending on where you are. So that is how precise 10 stops image stabilization is. The 10 stop is rated for center of frame. At the edges of the frame is rated for 8 stop. And even that is still better than the original 7 stop for the X2D Mark I. And within 1 day of use of the camera, you definitely have connected it to the mobile app, the focus app itself, and you will notice that actually the firmware of the body as well as the lens can be updated through the app. No longer need to copy a memory file, load it into the camera, and then do the firmware update. It is now very, very simple, and it goes through every single time. If you have a lens to update, just mount it on the body, connect the camera to the app, and it will also update the firmware. Another function that is enabled is also remote activation. So now, even if this camera is in your backpack and without touching the camera at all, you can use the mobile focus app to turn on and off the camera and throw all the files and pull the picture files into your mobile device without touching the camera. And then after that, you can just turn it off. And through the focus app, you can actually do HDR workflow end to end. So it captures HDR inside, and you are able to do HDR editing on the focus app as well. The dynamic range has now increased to 15.3 stop on this new camera as opposed to the 15 stop. And where is that capturing? It's actually capturing on the darker side of things. So ISO, if you remember, it is actually 1/3 stop lower, which is ISO 50, the native ISO here, and this is ISO 64. And because of the LiDAR sensor coupled with the 425 zone focusing, the face detect autofocus, it is now able to focus a lot faster. And is it due to the lens? Well, maybe, maybe not, but the whole autofocus system is actually noticeably faster. Okay, so these are the 10 things that you observe within 1 day of use. So the last segment I want to cover in today's video very, very quickly is to talk about this lens itself. This is the exclusive series lens, 35 to 100E series lens, right? It is actually pretty large and pretty heavy. It comes in at 894 grams, and the length itself is 138 millimeter, and this is an external zoom, right? So when you zoom it out, it goes up to 178 millimeters. So it is internal focusing, but external zoom, so the front of the lens actually moves in and out. So it uses a 86 millimeter filter thread. The filters are going to be big and they're going to be quite expensive to get. Now on the camera, you'll notice that there are 3 rings. The first ring is actually a focus ring, which is pretty smooth and pretty light. The second ring is actually controlling the zoom. It is better damped, it is heavier to turn around, but it is pretty consistent and linear damping throughout the entire range. And the last ring here is actually the control ring, which they claim that it has been taken over from the V series lens. The V series lens, I think the 25mm and the 90mm V lens, they will have a clickable or a smooth control here, and there's a button that you can control, but on this lens, no such thing, right? Other than that, the lens itself just has a focal point readout, so there's nothing else on it, no distance scale, no clickable, declickable option on the control ring. Well, there is the Victor Hasselblad plate right here, similar to the V series lens here, but otherwise, largely this is a not visually remarkable lens, but it has presence because it is so bloody big. Now, I have to talk about the variable aperture for this. Now, this is rated at f2.8 at the wide end of 35mm, down to f4.0 at 100mm on the longer range. Now, but when you actually go through the entire zoom range, the aperture will change, right? Now, I actually checked it out. The aperture, the variable aperture actually stops down pretty quickly, right? So at 35mm, it gives you 2.8. The moment you touch it just a little bit and you hit 37mm, you're going to drop to f3.2. That's 1/3 of a stop down. And at 55mm, it will drop to 3.5. And at 73mm all the way to the 100mm, it's going to be at f4.0. Now, this lens, in terms of performance, it is actually pretty sharp. Now, I'm not showing any photos. I've just taken a couple over the last 72 hours to test it out. The lens, it actually is pretty sharp throughout the entire zoom range, and the bokeh is still pretty good at f4.0, especially at the 100mm end, where there is quite a large degree of compression. Now, the AF speed is actually very fast and very silent. And the last thing I want to tell you about is the shutter speed. The shutter speed, well, let me just try once and see whether you can hear that. It is heavy, it is very confident, and it is not very loud at all. Now, this is as opposed to the 90mm that I have here. That is one loud shutter. Okay, so this is a very quick rundown on all the things that I've observed within the first 3 days of owning this combination of the 35mm to 100mm E lens as well as the X2Dii Mark II. Now, if you are interested in this and all the various subsequent videos that I'm going to be producing for this camera body as well as this lens, do say subscribe to this channel and I will see you in a future video. Oh, maybe before we go, a bonus tip. This is an L plate that I've been using with my X2Dii Mark I, and if you are interested to know and if it matters to you, it actually fits right into the X2Dii Mark II. That was quick, and that's all for today's video. So if this has been helpful to you, don't forget to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to this channel, or even better still, do a super thanks in this video to contribute in monetary sense to help me run this channel. Kind of broke after paying for all this stuff on my own, you know. Okay, I'll see you again soon.